It was a quiet afternoon when Robert pulled into his driveway after attending a high-level security meeting at the government office. He noticed something strange right away. His 11-year-old daughter Jessica was sitting outside their front door in her wheelchair, looking upset and holding her stomach. Her face was pale, and she seemed to be fighting back tears. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Robert asked, rushing to her side. He could feel his heart racing as he knelt down next to her wheelchair. Jessica took a deep breath before explaining what had happened. The neighborhood association president, Mrs. Patricia Wilson, had just yelled at her and kicked her in the stomach. It all started because of their golden retriever, Rex, who helped Jessica with her daily needs. Patricia had demanded they get rid of the dog immediately, claiming it violated the community's pet rules. "She said Rex makes too much noise," Jessica explained, her voice shaking. "When I told her Rex helps me with my wheelchair and brings me things, she got really angry. She grabbed my chair, and when I tried to move away, she kicked me hard right here." She pointed to her stomach, where a red mark was starting to show through her shirt. Robert felt anger boiling inside him, but he knew he had to stay calm for Jessica's sake. He worked as one of the top advisors for national security, dealing with threats to the country every day. But right now, nothing was more important than his daughter's safety and well-being. He called his wife, Dr. Lisa Mitchell, who worked at the Children's Hospital downtown. "Lisa, you need to come home right away. Someone hurt Jessica," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. While waiting for Lisa to arrive, Robert took pictures of Jessica's injury with his phone and wrote down everything she told him about the incident. He knew from his work that evidence collection was crucial, even though this was much closer to home than his usual investigations. When Lisa arrived 15 minutes later, she immediately examined Jessica's injury. As a doctor specializing in children's care, she could tell the kick had been forceful. "We should take her to the hospital for x-rays," she said, her professional training taking over despite her obvious worry. That evening, after returning from the hospital with confirmation that Jessica had severe bruising, but no broken bones, Robert sat in his home office thinking about what to do next. He knew people in power who could help, but he also knew he had to handle this properly through legal channels. He looked at the medical report on his desk, then at the family photos on the wall. His job was to protect the nation from threats, but his most important job was protecting his family. Patricia Wilson had no idea who she had messed with, and now she would learn that hurting a child, especially one with special needs, came with serious consequences. The next morning would bring new challenges, but tonight, Robert focused on comforting Jessica and planning their next move carefully and strategically. The next morning, Robert woke up early and found an official letter from the neighborhood association slipped under their door. It was stamped with the HOA seal and addressed to the Mitchell family. As he read the formal complaint, his jaw tightened. The letter accused them of violating the community's no unauthorized pets policy and demanded they remove their dog within 7 days or face heavy fines. Robert decided to take action immediately. He drove to the local police station to file a report about what happened to Jessica. When he arrived, a familiar face greeted him. Officer Mike Wilson, who wore the same last name tag as their HOA president. Robert's stomach dropped as he realized this wasn't a coincidence. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Mike asked with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Robert explained the situation clearly, showing the medical report and pictures of Jessica's injury. As he spoke, he noticed Mike's expression changing from concern to defensive. When Robert mentioned Patricia Wilson by name, Mike's pen stopped moving across the paper. "I'll need to get more details," Mike said, suddenly seeming less interested. Sometimes these neighborhood disputes aren't as serious as they seem. Kids can exaggerate things when they're upset. Robert felt frustration building, but kept his voice calm. "My daughter was physically assaulted by an adult. The hospital confirmed she has severe bruising. This isn't a simple disagreement." Mike wrote something down, but then looked up with a dismissive expression. "We'll look into it, but I have to tell you, Mrs. Wilson has been a respected member of this community for 20 years. She volunteers at the school and organizes all our neighborhood events. I find it hard to believe she would hurt a child. As Robert left the station, he realized the local connections ran deeper than he thought. He drove home feeling troubled but determined. When he arrived, Lisa met him at the door with more disturbing news. Patricia has been going door to door, Lisa said, her face flushed with anger. She's telling everyone that we're the troublemakers. She claims Jessica made up the whole story to get attention, and that Rex is a dangerous dog who barks all night. Robert ran his hand through his hair, thinking quickly. He knew from his security work that controlling the narrative was crucial in any conflict. Patricia was getting ahead of them, turning their neighbors against them before they could tell their side of the story. Later that afternoon, Robert's phone buzzed with a message from their neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who lived 3 houses down. I saw what happened yesterday through my window. The message read, I have video footage of the whole thing. Can we meet privately? A glimmer of hope sparked in Robert's chest. He knew that sometimes the truth had a way of coming out, no matter how hard people try to hide it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he had new evidence that might change everything. He looked at Jessica, who was playing quietly with Rex, her service dog loyally by her side. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about justice and making sure no other child would face what Jessica had experienced. That evening, Robert met Mr. Thompson at the local coffee shop, away from prying eyes. The older man looked nervous, glancing around before pulling out his phone. I was watering my plants when I heard the commotion, Thompson explained quietly. My security camera caught everything. I know Patricia's family has influence here, so I wanted to give this to you directly. As Robert watched the footage on Thompson's phone, his heart pounded. The video clearly showed Patricia grabbing Jessica's wheelchair, arguing loudly, and then kicking her when Jessica tried to back away. The worst part was Patricia looking around afterward to see if anyone was watching. Can you send this to me? Robert asked, keeping his voice steady despite his anger. Already did. Thompson nodded. I emailed it to the address Jessica gave me when she helps with grocery deliveries. That kid's always been helpful to us older folks. Robert thanked him and headed home with determination. He knew he needed more evidence, so he spent the next few days quietly talking to other neighbors. Many had witnessed Patricia's aggressive behavior over the years, but stayed quiet out of fear. Mrs. Chen, who lived directly across from the Mitchells, admitted she'd heard the whole incident from her garden. I saw the bruise on Jessica's arm too when she tried to show Patricia her service dog's official papers, Chen whispered, looking over her shoulder. Patricia grabbed the papers and threw them on the ground, said they were fake. By Thursday, Robert had collected statements from 5 neighbors who had either seen or heard what happened. He also learned that Patricia had a pattern of bullying families who didn't follow her personal rules, often targeting those she thought wouldn't fight back. Robert arranged for a medical expert through his government contacts to examine Jessica's injuries. The report concluded that the bruising pattern matched a forceful kick from an adult, not an accidental bump as Patricia claimed in her HOA complaint. Lisa supported Robert's efforts by documenting everything in a detailed written account, including Jessica's emotional distress and nightmares since the incident. As a doctor, her medical insights added credibility to their case. Meanwhile, Patricia continued her campaign. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for the following Tuesday to vote on what she called animal control measures, but everyone knew were specifically targeting the Mitchell family. Robert received the meeting notice with specific dress code requirements and reminder that homeowners would be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. The notice also mentioned that Patricia's 3 grown sons would attend as concerned community members, along with several off-duty police officers, including Mike Wilson. Robert smiled slightly as he read the notice. Patricia was preparing for battle, bringing her army of supporters. She had no idea that her opponent wasn't just another homeowner trying to keep his daughter's service dog. He began making subtle phone calls, arranging his own support, though he knew he'd reveal his position only when the time was right. The meeting was just 5 days away, and Robert planned to use every hour to prepare. He organized his evidence methodically, creating a clear timeline of events with supporting documentation. Patricia wanted a fight, and he was more than ready to give her one, legally and strategically. The evening of the HOA meeting arrived, and Robert dressed in a simple button-down shirt and khakis, deliberately avoiding anything that might suggest his real job. He wanted Patricia to feel confident, even overconfident. Lisa stayed home with Jessica, who was too nervous to attend. Robert arrived at the community center to find it packed. Patricia stood at the front, surrounded by her sons and several uniformed police officers. Her confident smile suggested she believed this would be an easy victory. "Before we begin," Patricia announced, "I want to remind everyone that tonight's meeting is about protecting our community from dangerous animals and irresponsible homeowners. We must maintain our standards." Patricia spent the first 20 minutes describing various violations the Mitchell family had supposedly committed. She claimed Rex barked excessively, damaged flowers, and frightened children. She detailed neighbors' complaints about the dog, though Robert noticed several of those she mentioned avoided eye contact. Furthermore, Patricia continued dramatically, "When I tried to address these concerns with their daughter, who was attempting to walk a dog she clearly couldn't control, she became hostile. I barely touched her arm to steady her, and she fell dramatically, claiming injury." Murmurs spread through the room. Patricia's version painted Robert's family as troublemakers and herself as a patient woman pushed too far. She presented a thick folder of evidence, mostly photos she'd taken of their yard and street from various angles, pointing out minor issues like leaves on their lawn. "We must vote to implement stricter pet regulations," Patricia declared, "for the safety of our children and the value of our homes." When Robert's turn came to speak, he stood slowly, noting how Patricia's smile widened. She clearly expected him to plead or become emotional. "Thank you for this opportunity to address the board," Robert began calmly. He didn't mention his job or background. Instead, he pulled out Thompson's video on his phone and asked to connect it to the large screen. "I think it's important for everyone to see what really happened," he said simply. As the video played, showing Patricia clearly kicking Jessica and looking around guiltily afterward, the room fell silent. Patricia's confident demeanor cracked slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I also have medical documentation of my daughter's injuries," Robert continued, displaying the forensic report that proved the bruising pattern matched a forceful kick, and signed statements from 5 neighbors who witnessed the incident. Patricia tried to regain control. "This is clearly edited footage from security cameras. Anyone can fake these things nowadays." Robert smiled slightly. "That's interesting you should mention editing, Mrs. Wilson, because I understand the HOA's security footage from that day mysteriously malfunctioned. Yet surrounding homes cameras all worked perfectly." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Several knew about the missing footage but hadn't questioned it. Now the implication hung heavy in the air. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Robert stated, maintaining his calm tone. "I'm here to ensure the safety of all children in our community, including my daughter, who requires a service dog for legitimate medical reasons. I have documentation from the state proving Rex is a certified service animal." He handed the documents to the board secretary, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted against Patricia's claims. "Perhaps we should postpone the vote," suggested one board member tentatively, "until we can thoroughly investigate these serious allegations." Patricia's face reddened as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was unraveling before her eyes. The tension in the room grew thick as Patricia's careful plans fell apart. Her face turned bright red as she realized the board members were looking at her with suspicion instead of support. She tried desperately to regain control of the situation. "This is ridiculous," Patricia shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "Are you all going to believe some edited video and fake documents over someone who has led this community for 8 years? But her sons, who had come to support her, were now whispering among themselves, clearly troubled by what they'd just seen. Even her nephew Mike, the police officer, looked visibly uncomfortable in his uniform. Robert remained calm, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "I'm simply asking for truth and fairness. No family should fear for their child's safety in their own neighborhood." One of the board members, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Richards, cleared his throat. "Patricia, I've known you for many years, but I've also heard whispers about your aggressive approach to handling disagreements. Perhaps we should." Patricia cut him off. "Don't you dare question my methods. I've kept property values high in this neighborhood. I've organized every charity event, every community picnic. Are you all going to throw that away because of one small incident with a troubled child?" The room gasped at her words. Even her most loyal supporters looked shocked at how she described Jessica. Robert felt his jaw tighten, but maintained his composure. "Mrs. Wilson," another board member spoke up, "your years of service are appreciated, but assaulting a child with special needs is not a small incident. The medical evidence is clear." Patricia's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies but finding only concerned faces. She could feel her power slipping away. In a last desperate move, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Fine. You want to see everything," she shouted. "I have recordings too. Conversations that will shock you all." She pressed play on her phone, connected to the speaker system. The recording crackled to life, but instead of helping her case, it made things worse. The audio clearly captured Patricia bragging to another board member about teaching the disabled girl a lesson, and how her weak father would never dare challenge me. As her own words echoed through the room, Patricia's face went from red to deathly pale. She had accidentally played the wrong recording, one that proved Robert's case completely. Robert couldn't help but feel a moment of satisfaction as Patricia scrambled to turn off the device. The room erupted with shocked murmurs. Her sons looked mortified, and Mike Wilson seemed to shrink in his uniform. Finally, Robert stood and addressed everyone one last time. "I believe my point has been made clear. My family simply wants to live peacefully in this community. We want our daughter to feel safe playing in her own yard with her service dog." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I work in national security," he revealed calmly. "My job is to protect people from threats. I hoped I'd never have to use those skills in my own neighborhood. I trust this board will do the right thing." The room fell silent as everyone processed this new information. Patricia slumped in her chair, realizing she had been fighting someone far more powerful than she ever imagined. The tide had turned completely, and justice was finally within reach. The day after the meeting, Robert's phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Deputy Attorney General Williams, someone he worked with on national issues. Robert had called her the previous evening, sharing the full story and evidence. "Robert, I've reviewed everything you sent," Williams said. "Assaulting a minor with disabilities is a federal hate crime. We're taking over this case from local authorities." Within hours, federal agents arrived at Patricia's house with official papers. Police cars lined the street as Patricia was led away in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hands. Her nephew Mike was suspended from the police force pending investigation for trying to cover up the crime. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that afternoon without Patricia. They immediately voted to remove her as president and appointed Mr. Thompson as temporary leader. The board also voted to refund all the fines Patricia had imposed on various families over the past year. Lisa drove Jessica past their street while the arrest happened to avoid traumatizing her further. They went for ice cream instead, where Jessica chatted happily with her friends, unaware of the dramatic events unfolding at home. 3 weeks later, Robert received a call from his boss, Director Peterson. "I hear you've been busy," Peterson chuckled. "The story about you using your national security training to help your daughter reached my desk." Robert worried for a moment that he might be in trouble for using his position. "Don't worry," Peterson continued. "You handled it perfectly, through proper legal channels. In fact, your actions helped uncover police corruption at the local level. That's exactly what we need. People who stand up for justice at every level. Patricia's lawyer contacted the family to discuss a settlement. Patricia admitted guilt in exchange for reduced jail time and agreed to pay for Jessica's medical care and therapy. She also had to attend anger management classes and was permanently banned from any HOA leadership position. 6 months passed quickly. Jessica started a therapy group for children facing bullying, with Rex by her side as the group's unofficial therapy dog. Her confidence grew as she helped other kids find their voices. The community transformed too. The new HOA board listened to residents' concerns and created fair policies that protected families with special needs. They installed new security cameras throughout the neighborhood to prevent future incidents. One sunny afternoon, Robert found Jessica in their backyard teaching Rex new tricks. She looked up at him with a bright smile. "Dad, did I tell you? Mrs. Chen asked me to help her plant flowers next week. She says I have the best ideas for her garden." Robert ruffled her hair gently. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. And guess what? Mr. Thompson said he might get a dog too. He wants Rex to teach it good manners." As he watched Jessica play with Rex, Robert thought about how the whole situation had changed their neighborhood. Sometimes standing up to bullies, no matter how powerful they seemed, was the only way to create real change. His national security training had taught him to face threats head-on, but it was his love for Jessica that gave him the courage to fight back. The community was healing, and their family could finally enjoy the peaceful life they'd moved there to find. Justice had been served, and more importantly, Jessica was safe and happy again. 6 months after the HOA meeting, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jessica's therapy sessions helped her work through the trauma, though some days were harder than others. Rex, her loyal golden retriever, seemed to sense when she needed extra comfort, resting his head on her lap during quiet moments. One Saturday morning, a letter arrived from the federal court. Patricia Wilson had finally been sentenced. Along with 8 months in prison, she would have to complete 200 hours of community service working with children with disabilities. Her nephew Mike lost his police badge for good after admitting he tried to influence witnesses. "How do you feel about it?" Lisa asked Jessica gently as they sat at the breakfast table. Jessica thought for a moment, petting Rex's soft fur. "I feel safe now," she said simply. "And I'm glad she has to help other kids like me. Maybe she'll learn not to be mean anymore." Later that day, the family attended a neighborhood barbecue organized by the new HOA board. It felt different from past gatherings. People smiled genuinely, children played freely, and there was no tension in the air. Mr. Thompson, now HOA president, had transformed the community into a welcoming place for everyone. During the barbecue, several neighbors approached the Mitchell family to apologize for not speaking up sooner. "We were scared of Patricia," admitted Mr. Kumar, who lived next door. "But watching you stand up to her inspired us to be braver." Jessica became something of a neighborhood hero. She started a junior volunteer group where she and other children helped elderly neighbors with yard work and grocery delivery. Rex became the unofficial community mascot, and parents asked Jessica to help introduce their children to dogs properly. As the months passed, Robert received recognition at work for handling the situation with integrity. Director Peterson mentioned the case during a staff meeting as an example of how security principles apply to protecting families, not just nations. On the first anniversary of the incident, Robert found Jessica writing in her notebook at the dining table. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" he asked. "I'm writing down what happened," she explained. "My therapist says it might help other kids who go through something scary. If they know someone stood up for what's right, maybe they'll be brave too." Robert sat beside her, amazed at his daughter's resilience. The experience that could have broken her spirit had instead strengthened it. She had learned that justice might take time, but it was worth fighting for. That evening, the family received a surprise visit from several neighbors who wanted to start a community watch program to ensure every child felt safe. They asked Robert to advise them on basic security measures without revealing his full expertise. As the sun set, Robert watched from their porch as Jessica played in the yard with neighborhood children. Rex bounded beside them, his golden coat gleaming in the fading light. The street that once felt threatening now buzzed with laughter and friendship. Patricia's trial had become local news, creating awareness about disability rights throughout the town. Other neighborhoods began examining their policies, ensuring no child would face similar discrimination. Robert smiled as Lisa joined him on the porch, slipping her hand into his. They had faced a storm and emerged stronger. Their community healed, their daughter thrived, and their belief in justice remained unshaken. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting for a nation, but from protecting those closest to home. Life had come full circle, but this circle was better than before, filled with understanding, compassion, and the knowledge the